Hi everyone, good day. I am teacher Sheila and today I will discuss what is ethical egoism. So the pattern of this report is includes first definition and then the grounding and psychological egoism to be followed by coherence and consistency and lastly the prisoner's dilemma. The continuation of this report will be reported by teacher Irish. Alright, let's begin. What is ethical egoism? Upon hearing the word ethical egoism, there is already two big words here. We have ethics for morality and ego for desire. So, meaning to say there should be a sense of balance but between what is moral and what we want or what we desire. So, let's dig deeper. Ethical egoism is a normative theory. Basically, it marks what actions are deemed appropriate as a standard of behavior, what is right and wrong in the society. And the basis of this theory is the self-interest of an individual. Note that self-interest is different from selfishness. Self-interest, according to Roller 2021, pertains to the motive itself of the action. You are doing the action because of your benefit. But when we say selfishness, there is no morals, ethics, or any standards included in that. So there is an action. It is already a behavior that you don't care about what other people say as long as you get what you want. So in a gist, ethical egoism is putting your interest in line first, but still following with what the society believes to be right and wrong. Now that you know the meaning of self-interest, I want you to ponder upon this question. Do you believe that the pursuit of self-interest should be the person's primary growth? I want you to think of that deeply as we go along with the discussion. So now let's continue. Under ethical egoism, we have two: individual ethical egoism for a person, a single person, and universal ethical egoism. So individual ethical egoism believes that the person will do the thing as long as it is under his or her own interest, as long as he or she desires to do it. And in terms of cooperation, he or she will help as long as it contributes back to them. So, universal ethical egoism, on the other hand, believes that all people, me, you, everyone, puts their self-interest first. And the extent when or the time they will help and the extent of how much they will help will be based on their interest to do so. As long as it is beneficial to them, they will help. So now, given that we knew that ethical egoism revolves around the benefits and interests, we also have reciprocal altruism. Or in a quotation, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. It is a notion to cooperate because we see it in our own interest. We always do the thing, or we have this mutual benefit and partnership to do the certain action because we will also have benefits in return. So there is first an expectation, a promise, okay, that you will have each other's back. So I know most of you will be wondering about utang na loob, which will be discussed later on. So now let's go to the most exciting part of this topic, which I personally included this because it is very intriguing for me: reciprocal altruism versus utang na loob. So, utang na loob is one of our unique Filipino values. But as we recall, reciprocal altruism is expected and has partnership. But what about utang na loob? According to Agaton 2017, utang na loob has the feature of reciprocity. Ibinabalik talaga natin ang utang na loob. But its original intent is not to be expected, since when we translate utang na loob, it means debt from the inside. So it is felt by the receiver of that good actions, not the giver itself. So the giver wants to help another person, but that giver does not expect anything in return. So that is the concept of utang na loob. But as we go along the study of Agaton, you will be surprised to find out that there are a lot of manifestation of cultural practices about utang na loob. It could be intentional, unintentional, accidental, and many more. So I will paste my references about this. But in a nutshell, reciprocal altruism is expected in partnership, while utang na loob should not be expected. Now, let's move on to the grounding and psychological egoism, which is different from ethicals because ethical egoism has morals in it, while psychological revolves around the behavior, way of thinking, conduct of an individual. So it is descriptive theory. It describes the action that usually done by the person. It is a factual claim, and it claims that people behave mostly based on the self-interest. A lot of philosophers believes in this notion too. But to say that it is in our nature to be egoistic, so we will be egoistic, and it will mark our egoistic action as right is not convincing enough for ethical egoism. So it will fall under the naturalistic fallacy, which was introduced in the earlier chapter of the book, but I will provide a short recap about that. So now we have naturalistic fallacy, which is, as we recall, it is associating something morally good into our natural nature. For example, pleasure. So in a naturalistic fallacy in this lesson, to see or to believe that the people will put the best interest forward because it is in their nature to be egoistic is not first. It is not clear to see if we can derive the value of ethical egoism from that, because if we always put our best interest forward, we should always be motivated. But we have the moral function, we have the moral language to be motivated even if we are not inclined to do the action. For example, cheating. In cheating, you will have the benefit, but you also know you have that moral function that cheating is not the right thing to do, so you will not do the action. So first, that's the first one, not clear. And then the second one is there is a poor reason in believing that it is what we ought to do based on the ethical egoism. Because if many of us cheats, because many of us believes that it is the right thing to do, it does not mean that it is the right thing to do. Okay? So now let's go to the consistency and coherence. So incoherent because what will happen if all of the people on earth will put their self-interest first at the same time? For example, famine. What will happen? Who will eat first? The young, the adult, the capable people, or others? And it is also inconsistent because if the other person's interest is against yours, what will prevail? So to say that ethical egoism is very individualistic and is very subjective in nature. So we also have our own concepts, what is right and wrong based on our own self-interest only. So to further understand this coherency and consistency and the ethical egoism, let's take a look at the prisoner's dilemma. So imagine the cops arrested two suspects, and each suspect was being interrogated in two different rooms. Okay? So they are both offered the following deals. If both of them betrayed each other, they will end up with 10 years imprisonment each. If one of them betrayed another and the other people or the other person did not betray the one person, the person convicted will have 20 years of imprisonment, while the one who betrayed the person will be free. And if both of them decides to not both betray each other, they will go both free. So these are a sample of prisoner's dilemma. So as you can see, there is a fear, there is an anxiety, there is no assurance about who will betray one person or if they will betray each other. So that will be discussed on the next slide. So in the prisoner's dilemma, we can witness that ethical egoism is first incoherent and inconsistent because it's solely based on the individual self-interest. So it lacks assurance, which often leads to violence and war, okay? So there is a need for a concrete and external thing that will guarantee that we will not break our promise. Since it is very individualistic and subjective, if that person decides that helping you is not beneficial already and decided to abruptly drop you, so we need to have a zone that will prevent those things from happening. So we have two structures that will help us in that. First is morality. But what will happen if a person suddenly decides to go or to neglect the other people, because morality here is not as strong as morality in other perspective. because morality, what is moral, is based on the self interest. Okay? So that is when the enforcement mechanism comes. That's why ethical egoism usually has to do with the political and systematic laws and reinforcement. So that's the end of my report about from the book, but I will include some researches about ethical egoism. I hope you are enjoying our lesson. So, in the last version of this report, I will be presenting three different researches which are very interesting in terms of ethical egoism and egoism in a nutshell. So, the first is Play Egoism, a case study of the relationship between self-interest and ethics in video games by Indiana Rose in 2022. It is recently published. So, in the latter portion of of the thesis, it was found out that self-interest and morality cannot be separated. Self-interest will always be part of our morality, and that morality will always include concern for other people, and that self-interest and morality is both complicated. And it was noted that often they may be always in conflict but always related. So we cannot actually separate self-interest with the morality or with the common good, ano? Because it is very important to find always the balance between the two. They may be always in conflict but it is always related, which will be also touched and discussed in the next researches. So, next. The next one would be under Lamb 2022. It is titled Reconciling Flourishing Egoism with Common Morality. So as I mentioned earlier, self-interest and morality cannot be separated. So there is another branch of egoism which is called flourishing egoism, and it is not caging self-interest into material aspects. As we always quote, self-interest is benefits of something, benefits in material aspects, in relationship, in power, and status. So, Lamb explored the idea of spiritual dimension, which is also as important as our material aspects, wherein it is not always for your benefits within the self, but also in the benefits of other people. One example of this is friendship. Friendship in classic egoism is viewed as tools, but in flourishing egoism, friendship is viewed as conducive and constitutive for the individual's benefit. So it's not just a tool, but it's very essential in the view of oneself. So this last research, I chose this research since we are studying now philosophical theories and etc. So this is made by Friedland, Mitch, and Cole on 2020, titled Uncovering the Moral Heuristics of Altruism, a Philosophical Scale. So when we say heuristics, it's a process or methods, and then altruism is the selfless concern. So it's likely uncovering or exploring the moral process for that moral concern or common good. So it is revealed that the ontology here, so I actually jumped into different parts. I go straight to the surprise findings. And what surprised me really is that virtue ethics and deontology ethics are often conjoined when practiced, while utilitarianism and egoism are both under consequential. Both shows that are interrelated. So there are some circumstances that it will put personal interest but still falls under the utilitarianism. Questions or statements related with egoism and utilitarianism includes three parts, which is it includes egoistic nature of personal interest, moral rules, and breaking rules for justification. So people who really are under this egoism and utilitarianism are more likely to break rules according to the research and standards for their own satisfaction. So that's all for my report. I hope you learned something. Thank you.